All right, let's just start with quick introductions, if you don't mind. Nathan, we'll start with you.
So I'm Nathan Grayson. I am a co-founder at Aftermath, which is a journalist-owned website dedicated to covering video games and the internet and everything that comes after.
And I'm Jason Koebler. I'm a co-founder of 404 Media, similarly journalist-owned website. We cover how technology impacts humans and really center the human in everything that we do.
All right, so let's start with your origin stories. How did your businesses come to emerge? And Jason, can we begin with you?
I've always been interested in the business side of journalism. I went to journalism school, and one thing that we learned there was journalists should have no idea how the businesses work. There should be this big firewall between advertising and the newsroom. And I believe, the journalists need editorial independence from advertising. But then I went into this business environment where our newsrooms were collapsing. There were constantly layoffs. I was at Vice for 12 years. I think I went through 4 or 5 rounds of layoffs, and every time that happened, we would sort of pivot the business model, and we'd bring in a new level of middle managers who were making tons of money. My team was always performing well, but we were constantly just laying people off, and eventually I just said I think that I'm smarter than these people. First of all, I don't think it's that hard. I think these strategies are stupid, some of the strategies, and obviously Vice went bankrupt, and so basically, it's not hard to say.
Proof is in the pudding.
So me and 3 other of my colleagues started 404 Media, just decided to sort of start from the ground up and think what is the minimum viable business that we can have here. And so we started in August 2023, and then Aftermath came soon after us.
And we came from a very similar space in that all of us were at basically Kotaku, which is a video game website from Gawker, which was ultimately purchased by first Univision, then a private equity firm called Great Hill. And over time, all of those websites degraded massively as a result. They had tons of layoffs. Some of them got sold, others got closed down. And then in tandem with that, a lot of publications in just the gaming space in general shut down, laid everybody off. And this happened over and over and over. And so around the same time, you also had the rise of, if you're familiar, Defector, which is a sports website that came actually out of one of our sister sites at Kotaku, which is Deadspin. Basically, the private equity firm that bought all those sites started interfering with their coverage. They were well, you guys only should do sports. You shouldn't cover politics. You should stay away from that. And eventually the staff of Deadspin was we're just not going to put up with this. We're all leaving. And so they did, and they founded their own website, which they own, and which has been tremendously successful. Defector employs over 30 people, I think, now. And so we saw that, and a lot of people saw that, and especially in the gaming space, they were well, there should be a Defector for this, too. And after a while, especially after all of us had been laid off from various other jobs, as at the Washington Post, they had their own video game vertical. That seemed okay, this is going to be great, mainstream games coverage. And they're you guys are doing well. The site is performing, but never mind. We decided to do something else. So after all of that, we were there should be a Defector for games. And so we launched it as Aftermath. And it's been a similar journey of, A, how do you run a business when you've never done that before? But also B, oh, you don't actually need all of this middle management and all of these people who are making it really top heavy in terms of how people are getting paid and whatnot. If you're a reporter, you can learn how to do at least those basic functions for survival. And then the rest is just, publishing good stuff.
I think the thing that's really happened over the last 5 years is that the publishing tools have become a lot more accessible, as have the business tools. If you wanted to start a subscription site 5 or 6 years ago, there was nothing. And then Substack came along, sort of integrated all of that. And we're on a platform called Ghost that sort of handles our subscription business. It integrates directly with Stripe. It's a website. It has the newsletter functionality and all of that. And so these sort of startup costs for doing this are essentially nothing now. And I think that is something that bigger publishers should be thinking about, because, this sort of like Substack revolution, but then there's a lot of other journalist-owned publications that have popped up where I think like star talent is starting to see that, executives make a lot of money. They maybe don't see any of the benefit from like the eyeballs that they're bringing in, the traffic that they're bringing in, the subscriptions that they're bringing in. I know I personally felt like pretty aggrieved at Vice, to be honest. It's like, we made a Netflix show. That was my idea. I got $0 from that. And like one of the really big things for me is the ownership of the IP, the ownership of the company, and also being able to see how the business is doing. It's like at Vice, I was pretty high up by the end, but I still had no idea if there were going to be layoffs tomorrow, if there were going to be layoffs in 3 weeks, and what teams would be affected, and what the new strategy would be. And I think that's very tough for like a company that's been around for a long time to give journalists that sort of insight. Like I understand why that's not the case, but now that I own my own thing, I know I'm not going to lay myself off tomorrow. I know my colleagues are going to have a job tomorrow, and the business, like I feel more secure now than I ever have in this industry.
Yeah, I think it's also a different value proposition for readers or viewers or what have you. Because I think that a lot of people look at the idea of subscribing to, say, like the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever, and they're like, well, those are giant companies. In one case, one of them is owned by like a literal billionaire. Why should I then also give more of my money to this? Whereas if you're running a smaller, like journalist-owned publication, then your readers can see where their money is going directly. It's like, oh yeah, there are these 5 or so people that I know and that I like, whose work I want to support, and I know that every dollar will go to them in their future endeavors. And I think that that's a much easier sales pitch than like, here's this giant institution that has always been around, but it needs you for some reason.
So there's a clear mission forming behind what you're doing, and it's part of this much broader wave, but that also, given the size and scale of the number of journalist-led startups that are emerging, it implies a level of stability to the model. So can you give some shape to your portfolio? How are you driving revenue, and in what ways are you making that a stable foundation?
Yeah, so we launched like day one. We made an appeal, like here is who we are. We sort of had a following from Motherboard back at Vice and said, we need your money to survive, like straight up. We didn't take any VC funding, anything like that, so we asked for subscriptions from day one. But I also knew that I wanted to have ads on the website because at my role at Vice, I interacted with our sales team, and I thought, we need a diversified revenue stream. It can't just be subscriptions, or it can be, but like, why not sort of take an all of the above approach? Like I wasn't scared of the idea of having advertisers. So I would say at this point, like probably 85% of our revenue is from subscribers, but we do have programmatic ads on the website. We have direct sold ads. We have a company that represents us called Buy Sell Ads that sells our newsletter, our website, and then we have another company that represents us for our podcast, which we have both programmatic and direct sold ads. And then we also do some like licensing stuff. We have a deal with Wired where they republish some of our stories. We're also very interested in the idea of like IP licensing in terms of doing like a series of stories, having it lead up to a big narrative, and then developing documentaries or narrative movies out of that, which I know a lot of publishers are trying now. We've actually had some success with that in terms of conversations, like development deals, things like that. And so we can really do a lot of the things that bigger publications do, just at a smaller scale, but our expenses are very low, so it works for us.
Yeah, we're similar, albeit I think that we came out the gate wanting to not do ads, especially at first, because we came from all of these websites that were increasingly inundated with them, such that they like literally wouldn't work. That sites would just crash and things like that, which is a terrible user experience. It's really frustrating when you're like 60% of the way through an article, and then the page reloads, and you're like, great, I've got to scroll all the way back down. This sucks. I think I'm just going to give up and do something else. Because also, like, on the modern internet, you're not just competing with like other sites or publications. You are competing with the totality of the platform ecosystem. So like if somebody bounces off of one of your pieces, then they're probably going to go to Instagram or YouTube or TikTok or wherever and disappear into that, and you will never ever see them again. So you lost your one chance because your website didn't work. We didn't want that. So like we launched with no ads on the site whatsoever so that it would be clean and easy and people could just like access our stuff, look around, read it, see if they liked it, and then hopefully subscribe. I think we'll probably always do that with the site. So like subscribers will probably always be like our #1 revenue driver, which so far has worked because like Jason was talking about, like our costs are really low. It's basically just paying ourselves. And now we have some contributors and other things like that. We do freelance, or we pay people for freelance. But beyond that, like we just have to make sure that we can keep the lights on and pay ourselves reasonably good salaries. That said, we do want to get into like at least a little bit of advertisement, probably more like on the newsletter and podcast side. That's a thing that we're working on. We're also working on like a syndication deal with another site, more to like, get our name further out there and reach new audiences as opposed to like it being a major revenue driver. But I think that to Jason's point, there are all these ways that you can kind of, you know, A, get a little bit more money than you were making, kind of reinforce the foundation or the bedrock of your site, and B, like replicate some of those functions of bigger media companies just by like partnering smartly. So like the company that we work with for our podcast is probably also going to help us with ads on the podcast and with ads on our newsletter. And they're like also a small worker-owned company that's very aligned with our values and views. And so we know that like they're not going to, you know, cover our stuff in ads for things that we don't approve of or that would like cause our audience to get pissed off. Because that's a really big thing for us is like our audience believes in our mission statement. That's what they're here for. And so if we suddenly started to behave in ways that were contradictory to that, some of them might leave and then we lose a lot of money. And then that's a tailspin that we maybe can't get out of. So we have to be very careful when it comes to picking specific ads and picking specific partners.
So how are you cultivating these audiences into your site, into your newsletter, and then ultimately into that end goal of your subscription and monetization layers?
Yeah, I think both Motherboard and Kotaku were very good at getting traffic by, you know, just having a pulse of the internet and how traffic flows work. Like at Vice, we were obsessed with Chartbeat, like I'm sure many of your newsrooms are.
We were too.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we knew we couldn't do commodity journalism. Like we had to have stuff you couldn't find anywhere else, especially if we were going to paywall some stuff. And so, you know, we really invest in original reporting. We try to be like cognizant of the news cycle, but not like totally connected to it. Like, you know, I know Elon and Trump are fighting right now. I didn't stop everything to go write an article about that. And by doing that, we've been able to stand out. We get a ton of traffic from Reddit. We get a ton of traffic from Blue Sky. Blue Sky's been huge for us.
Yeah.
Like actual real traffic in terms of, like, I know what good numbers are. The numbers coming from Blue Sky are insane right now. And then we ask people to subscribe to our newsletter, basically to sign up for free. We do what we call a free wall. So we actually publish articles without any wall of any sort. We kind of monitor the real-time traffic, and as it starts getting pickup around the internet, we'll add like, please give us your email address to read the rest of this article, and that sort of enters them into a sign-up flow situation where we say like, here's who we are, here's why we're doing this, here's how we're different from other publications, please support us. And we find that like over time, a lot of our free email list converts to paid subscribers.
Yeah, we use a lot of similar techniques. I think that it's really worth honing in a bit on like the email list approach, because that's like, I've talked to other people who work in this space too, and they say like that's their main driver of kind of subscription conversion. Because like the main thing that you want to do, at least at the outset, is like get people in the door for a site like this, right? And then the rest of it is simply like bombarding them with as much stuff that might eventually convince them to give you money. And you never know when that's going to happen, and it's really hard to measure.
And the bombarding is with like good articles,
Yes,
not
yes,
with like
not
please.
bullshit. Yeah, not garbage. But no, it's just like things that align well with, again, kind of the mission statement of your site, which in our case is to like cover games on the internet in this very like frank and unflinching way, and to like dig into things that actually matter as opposed to just like things that are frivolous or that, you know, other sites are already doing. And
Sorry. I think the other huge thing that both of us do, and you did it with Inside Baseball Week, which is like a theme week, but we tell our readers how the business works.
Yes.
And I think people are like really interested in that. And that's something that like at Vice, we would lay off like 200 people and then pretend like nothing happened. Like we would just go on the next day and just like, oh, same website, nothing has changed. But we've been able to sort of like demystify how digital media works, how the media ecosystem works. I mean, obviously we come with a point of view that like the old ways of doing things are very difficult. Like, I mean, I think that everyone I've met here has like represents really good publications, but obviously it's like, it's become a very difficult business. And I think that the more you can kind of explain that to readers, the more that they sort of get invested in the like mission of saving you and saving like this type of content. And I think that can apply to bigger publications as well.
Yeah. Well, and like, I think another thing to keep in mind on that front is like, just in general, no matter where you're working, but I think especially for sites like this that have a lot of people who really care and like are very dialed in, like your readership is not stupid. They are in fact like individually very intelligent and collectively still pretty intelligent, but I think, you know, in groups that falls apart a little bit. But if you treat them that way, then they will in turn care about you even more. And so like there's a, you know, indirect but still present monetary benefit to like giving them that insight. And like, even when things are not going perfectly, because I think that we've been fortunate so far to mostly be able to say, oh yeah, things are going well, and we're going to tell you the particular ways in which they're going well. But similarly, like, you know, we are new to running a business. There have been many like smaller bumps in the road of just, how do you do this? How do you do that? Uh-oh, our taxes are much higher than we thought they were going to be. And so we tell our readers about that too, like on our podcast and stuff. Like we don't write an article about it because that would be kind of funky. But you know, you use those like direct engagement tools and you say, yeah, if you want like a peek behind the curtain, we'll give it to you. It's right here.
So what I think is really interesting, and Nathan, you started to talk about the newsletter aspect to this, is in some ways, in many ways, you both have had to become almost like CRM marketers and really think through customer journey, the tactics of upsell, driving, you know, the flow through that welcome journey. How are you approaching those tactics? And then how are you approaching, you know, the massaging of the cadence in which you're then interspersing in sponsored content, your advertising script, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we try to treat customers the way that like I would want to be treated if I gave my email address to someone. So we try not to bombard people with ads. You know, we have like sponsored ads in our newsletters, but there's not tons of them. There's one per day. I think for us, it's also like we wanted to start with sort of minimum like product, like forgive me for the Silicon Valley terminology here, but like minimum viable product. And so we don't like have super advanced like targeting capabilities. We don't know that much about our subscribers, but I have like this sort of intuitive sense, like why would anyone subscribe to this? And then we try to just like make that pitch to people. And it works pretty well. I think that probably there are like efficiencies to be had. Like if we collected tons and tons of data about people and targeted them like in the optimized way, maybe it would lead to more subscribers, but it would also lead to other people saying like, what the hell, I subscribe to you because you write about privacy and are like anti-surveillance, and they would be upset. So there's like the weighing of like how to do this in a sort of respectful way. But at the same time, it's like we get people's emails, we send them articles, after a certain amount of time, we send them discounts, like that sort of thing. And then we just are constantly tweaking, like, did that work? Did that not work? We're not super heavy on the math side of things, but it's working enough. I think because our costs are so low, it's like maybe there's more juice to squeeze there, but we don't need to like pull that lever at the moment because the business is working. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's kind of the challenge too, is like, you know, we launched in this state where it was everybody who works for the site is like a writer, reporter, journalist. We still don't have like a dedicated, you know, like business person or somebody who's like running that side of the operation with an eye toward like, how can we tweak this? How can we ensure that we are getting max revenue from this or max exposure for this thing? It's all just sort of like us learning as we go. And so, yeah, a lot of it is just kind of intuition more than anything. And like doing things that other sites in the space have already done. Again, like I think one of the benefits of working in this kind of like journalist and media owned space is that the other people who also run sites that are similar, at least in terms of structure, if not subject matter, are really willing to just like share advice. Like it's not this thing where we're all like, you know, competing with each other or cannibalizing each other's user bases. Instead, it's like we will all want to see each other succeed, so we kind of all talk pretty regularly about like, hey, what's working for you? What did you do? And so like, again, you know, we're planning to completely revamp like our onboarding process for new subscribers or new readers in accordance with like what Defector does, because they have this like very kind of targeted early approach where like somebody signs up and then like I think like every week for a month, they get like a new specific email that's like sort of about some of the best stories that Defector has published, and like that's very personal in the way that it addresses them, so that they feel like they're being welcomed into something, and by the end they'll think, yeah, I kind of want to give this money, or like I want to stick around and keep giving it money. And like I think we could definitely stand to do a little bit more of that, as opposed to just like, okay, you're here, please don't go.
Yeah, I mean, I think we also we try a lot of things and try not to like dwell on the things that didn't work. We were around for, you know, a few months and then realized we were losing a lot of subscribers to their credit cards not working, which is like thing number one you learn about a subscription business. Like we didn't know that for a while, and we didn't have any sort of like churn buster type product to be like, your card was declined, please update that. And after, I don't know, like 6 months, 9 months, we realized that we added it in. We now get like tons of credit cards and subscriptions saved. And I try not to dwell on the people who churned out before we had that product. It's like we can only make decisions moving forward. Like we're learning. I've learned so much from the other publications that have done this. There's now like 10 of them, and like Nathan said, we talk all the time.
Shout out to like Hellgate as well. Let's see. Have we, because there are the two of us, and then there's Defector, there's Hellgate. Those are kind of the ones that people tend to mention.
Racket in Minneapolis. There's
there's Hearing Things.
Remap, and there's a lot of them now.
Yeah. Hearing Things covers music. They're former Pitchfork people. It's a really good site. You should check it out.
So, Jason, you talked a little bit about like there's an element of like you are monitoring results, but you're not like getting into the deep precision necessarily. Talk a little bit more about like how you think through measurement and the overall approach to test and learn as you go through developing this program.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be very honest, it's like we're doing all the journalism as well, and so like probably 90% of my time is focused on like how do I get a story that is going to do well, that is going to be impactful, that people are going to want to read, and that sort of thing. And we decided from the get-go, like we have to lead with incredible journalism, otherwise it won't work. And so we focus almost entirely on that. I think the business side of things, it's like I check like the analytics obsessively. Like I check our traffic, I check the number of signups that we get from any given article, I check how many people unsubscribed on any given day, I check how like the churn rates, the open rates and unsubscribe rates from emails. But at the end of the day, it's like we don't have an analytics team. It's just us looking at the numbers, and you know, we're not publishing so much content that like I feel like you need to have more bites at the apple to like really have a good sense of what is working and what is not. And one of the big things that we're competing against is like scale publications and AI slop and things like this. Like we are competing against the entire rest of the internet that like we were publishing articles, AI was scraping our articles and then republishing them within like 5 minutes of us publishing them on these like weird SEO sites. We would go there and they were publishing like 180 articles every hour because they were just stealing from the entire internet. And that's like what we're all competing against now. And so we have just been like, we are human beings here writing articles for human beings. We don't like SEO optimize our stuff. We don't think like this is definitely going to perform on X or this is definitely going to perform on TikTok. We're saying like, we want human being readers, because that's the only way this works is if like people pay us money to do this work. And that has worked so well because so many publications are leaning into how can we use AI to be more efficient, to publish more, so on and so forth. It's not going to work. And it's not going to work because you're competing against a child in Romania, a child in Bangladesh who's publishing like 9,000 articles a day about whatever. And they don't care about facts, they don't care about accuracy, but an SEO algorithm, it's going to perform there. And that's what you're competing against. You have to compete on quality at this point.
Yeah, you have to find people where they're at and then speak to them directly. And again, treat them as though they're intelligent, not as though you're trying to feed them as much slop as possible to like ensure that, you know, their content diet is complete or whatever that means. For us, that's also meant like, you know, doing things that, again, feel in line with the mission statement that we've already set forth, which is similar to what Jason is saying, like making journalism for human beings. And like, you know, going into the specifics that I think that maybe other websites wouldn't touch because they're too big and it's too niche. We did a recent, like, we do an annual theme week now called Inside Baseball Week, which is about like our particular media sphere and like the things that people often don't know about it because no one else talks about those things outside of that sphere. And I think that's been really helpful for us in terms of kind of, again, getting people into not just the individual articles that we're publishing as part of that, but our overall identity. Because that's what you're ultimately selling when you're doing this kind of a publication, is the identity of the thing. Not just like, here's a place where you can go to get a fire hose blast of news, but like, here's where you can go to get very specific perspectives from real people who you will come to know simply by following their work.
So where I want to end today is just at a certain point, your startups are no longer startups, and you start to enter a full matured state. What does that look like? And then what do you still need to solve to reach that end vision?
Yeah, I mean, this is a conversation we have every single day, which is, does 404 Media remain the four of us doing journalism and asking people for money and sort of growing naturally by us doing literally everything? Or do we try to become more like a traditional publisher? I mean, we'll always be different, but do we hire people? Do we hire people in business roles? Do we hire people in operations roles? Do we hire people to do more journalism? And it's hard to know because right now there's four of us. We each own 25% of the company. We are in the process of figuring out, like, how does one hire people? Like, we're talking to lawyers, like, we have lawyers, we're talking to lawyers. We need to sort of, like, figure out an employment contract, figure out ownership rights, things like that. And the good thing for us was, like, we were able to get this off the ground and prove it out without having to take VC money. There's no pressure to, like, return money to someone who has funded us. And so we'll grow at our own pace. And I think that we do aspire to be more, I think we already are more than a Substack. Like, we never wanted to be a Substack. We wanted to be a new website, a new publication, a new media company. But we wanted to do it very slowly because I think one, like, big mistake means, like, the death of the company, you know? And thankfully we're in a place now where we have a cushion, like, you know, we're around to stay, like, everything is going well on the business side, and we're now thinking about, like, how does one become a larger company without losing the core of who we are, and also, how do I not replicate what I was doing at Vice where I was managing 20 people? Like, I really enjoy sort of doing the journalism and getting my hands dirty and all of that sort of thing, and does the company lose something if, and all my co-founders are the same. We all do a little bit of everything. Like, do we lose something if we take this, like, special sauce that we have where it's like people come to subscribe because of who we are and give it to someone else and say, go sell our company now? Right.
Yeah, we're in an extremely similar boat where we look at it as, yes, we would like to grow and expand some, but I don't think that we ever want to become, you know, a 50, 100 person, 150 person, or whatever entity. Like, we want to remain relatively small. We want to keep our scale such that, like, even if things get bad for a little bit, or, like, you know, there's a recession or whatever, like, we're not going to have to get rid of people. It will always be, like, the same core group, maybe expanded slightly. Because, again, we come from these media companies that I think focused on growth and expansion and largesse. And the end result of that is that most of them are not around anymore. And the ones that are, they're a shell of their former selves. And, like, we never want to end up in that place. But there is an upside to expanding some. And like we've talked about this too, because we were discussing kind of the way that a lot of these sites converse, and there's this interoperability between them, even though they're all separate from one another. And like, I think that one of the things that at least some of us at Aftermath miss is being part of like a network, a group of sites that like they have different coverages and focuses, but they share like technology, they share a lot of like similar techniques, they're able to like share articles between each other and all of these different things. And like, we would enjoy more consistency on that front, because right now a lot of the websites that do exist that are independent talk to each other, but it's sort of like there's no organization to it. It's not like weekly meetings or anything. We're still all very separate, and so it would be cool to like tap into some of that older spirit, but that would also maybe involve like, you know, conjoining our companies in ways that I don't think anyone wants to do. So it's an interesting thought, but I think that for us at the end of the day, the goal is to keep the lights on and keep doing good work, and the rest will hopefully come naturally.
All right, and with that, what questions do y'all have?
There's one in the back there, Steve. I would say, as you're waiting for this question, gentlemen, I'm over here, John, just being a guy in the event business where, you know, we like lots of volume and ticket sales and all that jazz, I would say don't get greedy. That's my best advice to you, because once you start getting greedy, you lose that sense of originality and then that control that you want and you like, and that freedom. Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Hey guys, it was awesome. Really, really interesting too. Nathan, you kind of touched on this. My name is Mike from MGIG. You just kind of touched on it a little bit, but knowing that obviously there are other entities out there, other sites that you guys are, you know, all with the same kind of mission, where it's like you want to remove that power and bring it back to the journalists and stuff that are actually doing the work and want to have that kind of ownership with it. Understanding that there could be possibility in a collective, but not necessarily on the business side. Is that something you guys plan to look at as a way to have that kind of like strength in numbers of like, these are all these sites that are kind of contributing to that? Or is it just kind of like something where you guys are actively talking, but kind of sharing ideas back and forth, but not necessarily, you know, coming together in any kind of formal means?
Yeah, I mean, right now there's nothing really formal happening. We do end up just like talking in the background a lot. You know, there have been some ideas that like people have kicked around that I find interesting. Like, I think that, you know, one day in the not too distant future, like I could imagine a couple of the sites, for example, even ours, doing like a subscription package where you get like maybe a slight discount if you subscribe to both. I think that'd be cool. I think there are opportunities to do like co-branding on merch and stuff like that. There are all these little ways that you can basically say like, yeah, we're in this together. Like, it's a collective effort. Because I think that's the other thing is like, when you have this kind of a movement towards something different that's more human focused, like, people want to be part of that. They want to support it, not just because they enjoy the websites or the publications or even the people, but because they believe that this is how things should be. And you can tap into that.
Yeah, I mean, I have thought in my brain, not big, like we haven't had any conversations about this. I don't know if it will ever happen, but I've thought about sort of like an independent media, like ad network type thing. And what I mean by that is we don't have a huge scale. I mean, we are growing very quickly, but it's like we don't have an email list of millions and millions of people. But I think if you sort of like bundled all of us together and sort of like you're able to reach that scale that, you know, bigger advertisers might want. And I think also the people who subscribe to us, like I think of it more as like, I think of us as sort of like YouTubers and Instagram influencers who do journalism, sort of. Like, I think there's a lot of learnings that we've had from you know, like streamers and TikTok people who do like brand deals and things like that. Like, we're always going to prioritize the journalism, but like we do podcast style ads where I do a host read and it's like, get 10% off Farmer's Dog with code 404. And I think it's like people, like those ads perform very well because our audience trusts us. And so I'm not going to go shill some company that I don't like. But I think there might be an opportunity for like, oh, well, we don't have the scale, but between these 10 indie media sites, there is scale, and you can sort of do like a cross-publication sale, stuff like that.
Yeah, I really like that idea because A, that would be great for us, so let's talk. But B, because also, like, if you're thinking about it from the advertiser perspective, then you can be reasonably certain that if you're going to all of these like sites that are independent, reaching a particular kind of user, who I think is often hard to get to via traditional advertising because they're resistant to it. And so if you have these people who, again, trust the opinions of a lot of these like journalists who are, as Jason was saying, like almost on the content creation side of things, simply because like your general like readership, viewership, listenership is so aware of who you are and they trust you so directly as opposed to just seeing a byline, they see a person, then yeah, if you have them saying like, I've tried this thing, I endorse this thing, then there's a much better chance that somebody will actually check it out or actually spend money on it than just if they like hear an ad read by somebody that they've never heard of, you know, during a podcast. I'm like, okay, skip, back to the actual content.
Okay.
Just curious, has anyone tried to buy you guys?
We've had some people reach out, but I don't. One, we were not for sale, and two, I didn't know who they were. It was kind of like random like VC, not like yeah. Even after researching, I was like, I don't know what this company is or if this is serious.
Same guy wants to buy your house.
Yeah, I was like, is this a scam or is this real? Very unclear.
Yeah, no, we get a lot of those mixed. It's like those and people being like, we can offer you $1 million, no strings attached. And I'm like, A, you're just fully fake. Or B, there are obviously strings attached. And in either case, like, we don't want that. Because for us, we've always been of the mind that we don't want to be beholden to anybody, especially not at this early stage, because that would change our entire trajectory, our entire growth, and would probably force us to compromise our values in some sense. And like, we started this because we didn't want to compromise our values. That's like the main priority.
Well, thank you both. Really appreciate you sharing this journey.
Thank you for staying to the very end. Appreciate
Yeah, thank
it.
you.